Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Event Space. Today we are going to be mastering studio strobes. I flew Ian Spanier in to my studio here to light it for today's event. You're the master of this, man. Nobody does it like you, Ian. Welcome
That looks
back.
like window light to me. I didn't do any of that.
It's like six lights right now. Pieced it together. What's going on, dude? How's
You got your
everything
glowing
been? It's
lights
it's
on.
been a while
Everything's
since
good.
we've had
Everything's
you.
good.
So
Yeah,
to
I've had the good bad fortune of being on the road a lot this year. I'm working on a book on cigars, my third book, and literally the first 4 months of the year was traveling every other week to different locations to kind of complete this project that's honestly 17 years in the works, which is crazy. It's something I didn't ever intend on being in the world of cigars, but somehow I ended up in there. And so I needed to fill in a lot of blanks and cover some things I'd never covered in the past. And this book will be out in, I think, February of 25 is probably what we're looking at. But I think it's going to be something like 225 pages of photographs, which is going to be insane, combined with the author who has 35 years experience in the cigar world. This is his world. I just entered it. But it's basically going to be this massive biography of both of our worlds in the cigar world.
That's awesome. Huge congrats to you. And I swear, if I don't get that text from
Thank
you,
you.
like, hey, I want to come on the platform and talk about the book when it gets released,
Oh,
gotta have you back
hell
on here to
yeah.
talk about
Yeah,
it.
let's do it. Please. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Definitely. Well, today, you're yelling at us for using the pop-up flash. No, you're not really, but there's a lot better ways to light. As I had said to start this, you're a master of light. I've been using the Spanier stack ever since I learned it from you on my personal shoots. But today it's a pretty simple setup. You're going to take us through two setups, right? But same light,
Yeah.
same lighting for the most part.
Same light, just a slightly different modification. Really just what I thought that what I've sort of picked up over the last, X number of months or whatever, that this has been a little bit of a topic on hand is that I think a lot of beginner photographers are sort of afraid to take that step or that next step. And then even advanced photographers, they may not realize that there's this powerful little tool that you can use, especially if you're on the road and you don't have a truck or a big, way to get everything that you want in the kitchen sink with you. And here's this little tool that you can use, very lightweight, very portable, very travelable, and at the same time, beautiful quality of light. And that's really, as you just started with, is what it's all about, that quality of light. So, yeah, I thought it would be a fun thing to sort of walk through just a baby step of getting into the world of strobe in studio, out of studio. This could really be applied in many different places.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to step out of the way, let you do your thing, and I'll invite everybody out there watching us on YouTube to get your questions in. Don't wait until the end. Ian loves to be interactive. So if you guys have a question about something he's doing, why he's doing it, he does a great job of talking us through, but he also wants to answer your questions. So, Ian, I'm going to turn it over to you, let you take the dominant screen, and I'll play the background.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much. All right, guys. So basically, what we're going to start with today is a very simple setup. It's something I've used over basically the point at which I started using the Westcott FJ80, and then they then followed up with the FJ80 II, slightly improved model, and then the FJ80 SE as well. And I'm going to use the FJ80 II today. One of the most basic ways that I use a small strobe like this, and really just to demonstrate that you don't need humongous amount of equipment to make beautiful pictures. We have an amazing model today. She is actually a makeup artist, but I convinced her to be my model today, Shani Tabor. So she's going to join us in a moment. And then she enlisted a friend of hers, great hairstylist named Eski. I'm going to share their Instagram information with you guys as well so that we can follow each other, because that's how this community keeps growing. And let's see how a makeup artist turns into a model today. This will be fun. She's smirking at me over here, especially because she can't hear anything. So let's head over to set number one. I'm going to kind of break you down everything that I'm going to do in this setup, and I'll talk you through a little bit of the aspects of posing models as well as working with subjects, whether they are accustomed to being in front of the camera or not accustomed to being in front of the camera. I'll show you everything I did in this little setup, and we'll also be able to take a look at the images thanks to a Cam Ranger, which is a wireless transmitter I have attached to my camera that you will be able to see images. So let's walk through the setup first. I'm going to come over, I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll take some images as well. So first and foremost, let's have Shenny come on set with me. We're going to head over to our set. We're going to be right here against this post right here, and you're going to face towards me. I want you right on the edge of the post, so come around to the side this way a little bit more. Yeah. Now, the reason I'm doing that, very much so, is that the white post, I've already looked at this, and this is typical of what happens when I have a shoot on location. This is my home, so I know the challenge is here, but when I walk into a stranger's home, I do the same thing. Very first thing I do is always look at up. I like to know what the ceiling height is. That will determine what I'm capable of doing in different rooms if I'm using big studio strobes or going to intentionally put lights up in the air in any some sort of a way. Same thing with if I just have to put a background up. I want the room with the highest ceilings, obviously. So with this white banister, I know that my strobe is going to reflect off it quite a bit. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to use just a little piece of it. I don't want a lot of it. Now, behind Shenny are two French doors into the backyard. That LA sun is blasting down in our nice 80-degree heat wave here. So that is going to be a factor, but I'm actually going to use it to my advantage. So sometimes I will make those assessments, whether it makes more sense to bring a background in, whether to shoot against something that's just a blank background. But in this case, I thought it'd be nice to sort of use it as a bit of an environment. The sort of inspiration I got for this is coming from sort of some old Guess Jeans ads. And so that's really where I wanted to start. Low depth of field, but a nice pop of strobe on this. So as I mentioned, we're going to use the FJ80 II. I have a small attachment on it. Frio makes this, which is a cool little product. It has a 1/4 20 thread on it. That 1/4 20 thread goes into the side of the FJ80 II, and that allows me to mount it onto a stand or a tripod or other places like that. I'm only doing this for the purpose of my light metering. Now, I talk all the time about the importance of light metering. I think it's something that photographers miss the mark on. It's such a basic necessity to understanding light and will help you understand light in a better way. And I think it's something that too many people are missing out on right now. So ultimately, this is going to attach to my camera, but being somebody who does not like flash on top of camera, just from a personal standpoint, I'm going to create a little rig that you're going to see in a moment that's going to allow me to shoot slightly above camera in a style that I want to shoot, more than what would be if I just attach this to camera, which of course is possible. So the reason I've got the Frio attached to the FJ80 II is just so I can put it on a stand to take my light meter reading. So I'm just going to mount it here and just get a general distance. Now, the reason I'm doing it that way is because I am shooting on manual. Now, for those who are beginners, it might be easier to shoot with TTL, might be easier to shoot on program mode, all those things. But if you truly want to understand photography, shooting on manual is the route to go. Now, the FJ X3M trigger works with the entire Westcott series, the FJ80s, the FJ200s, and the FJ400s. It allows you to control your strobes from camera with this trigger. And they do make it for other cameras. I'm going to be shooting with a Canon R5 today, but you can also use this with Sony, Nikon, whatever camera you guys have. So as you can see, that allows me to pop a strobe. Now, you might have noticed that I did put a barn door, which is one of the accessories that you can add on to the FJ80 series. And I love this little accessory kit that comes with some gels, it comes with some grids and these barn doors, which I find super, super useful. Now, the reason I brought up the point about the post is that I know that I'm going to have a factor of what light does to that post. Shenny's wearing a dark jacket. I'm also popping a strobe that's not very soft on her in this case. So that flat is going to be a very reflective surface. That barn door is going to help me cut that light just a little bit to where it's a little bit more manageable for me. So I'm going to start off with the barn doors open, with the exception of the one on the right side, just so that I can control a little bit of that light spill onto the post. So I'm setting my camera for ISO 200. For those of you who don't know light meters, this is how simple it is. You set your ISO, you set your intended shutter speed, and then you pop your strobe or read your sunlight, and that will tell you where your aperture will be on camera. Super simple. So excuse my reach here, Shenny. Okay. And I'm going to get 402, which is pretty much on the mark. I actually wanted to shoot at about 4.0 in this case. The reason I wanted to shoot at 4.0 was this was a decision I made when I saw those French doors, when I saw what was happening outside. It's going to be bright back out there. I want it to blow out a little bit, so I'm going to let that happen. The other thing is that by shooting at a low depth of field, I'm able to put those doors somewhat out of focus. I want my focus to be on Shenny and her makeup and her face and all this stuff going on right here. That's all working for me. And I don't need that information back there. I actually have a thing on the table out there that I haven't put together in months and need to put it together, and I don't need you guys to see that as well. So camera is set to 1/200th of a second, which is where I had the meter set to. It's set to f4, that's my aperture. I read the meter at f4.02, slightly higher. Now the reason I'm okay with that is that I like my histogram to be juxtaposed a little bit to the right. I like more information that I'm going to then pull back in my final image, which you'll see on the Cam Ranger. The other aspect of understanding light is that if, at the very least, if you are not working with a light meter, that you do need to understand how to read the histogram on a camera. Looking at the LCD screen is not the only way to go. Sure, you can look at it, you can get accustomed to your camera, and you can make a general assessment to say, okay, this looks like a good image. But the true reality is that if you understand that histogram, which should be a very mountainous amount of information from black to white, gray being in the middle, that mountainscape, if it's juxtaposed slightly to the right, gives you room to pull back if you want things to be dark. So the dark jacket, for example, if I want those to be a little bit meatier darks, I can pull that back in post. But the capture being slightly to the right allows me to get more information. So if I did want to see, let's say that the jacket had some specific details, if this was a fashion suit, for example, and I needed to showcase that, that would allow me to have that information in the file so that that latitude is there if I want to utilize it. Okay, so we've got our strobe. I'm going to take it off this stand for now. I'm going to set the stand aside and use this for setup number 2. Now, I'm just going to attach this and then I'll share the mount that I put together here. Okay, so I put the Frio onto this crazy little contraption I put together here. That part is not needed. This is a Tether Tools magic arm. There's a number of different companies that make these magic arms. They're a great thing to have in your kit. It's super useful when you need to utilize super clamps, sometimes called Maffer clamps, hanging a light somewhere specific. Maybe you have to put a light up in the ceiling. This is a great way to utilize something without a stand. It also comes with a camera platform in this case, and I love this little setup. This is something I might do if I was shooting events, which I don't do very much of, but on occasion I do get asked to do things on the fly, running gun style, but I still want a strobe with me or I want some light that I can utilize. This is a great way to do this. It's not super heavy with a mirrorless camera, and you can see I've got my Spider holster hand grip, which helps me hold on to everything. When I do shoot horizontally, quite often I'll build this rig so that the light is over camera, and then I'll use the handle as a second means of supporting my strobe and camera at the same time. Okay, so once again, all settings. ISO 200, 1/200th of a second at f4. Make sure our strobe is on. The trigger is on manual. You might notice I do have a dual hot shoe. That's allowing me to attach my Cam Ranger and my strobe trigger right to the top of the camera. And this was just something I found, an accessory that works really well for me because I'm typically shooting with the Cam Ranger. I don't love shooting tethered, just as personal preference. All right, so let's get a test right here. I'm going to turn on the share screen so you guys can see everything from start to finish.
Real quick before you get started, we did have a question about triggering the flash from the light meter. I'm guessing that's not, because two completely separate units, but is there any other way to trigger the Westcott units? Is there like an app or anything like that?
So Westcott does have an app for the phone. So if you do want to trigger it from a phone, you can, I believe, use the phone for it. I've never done that. But what I typically will do is have more than one trigger on set. Quite often I'll have assistants who will be doing light metering. I'll be standing behind camera from wherever I'm shooting vantage point from. But as long as you have two triggers, you can still trigger the light with that second trigger, as long as you set the trigger that's on camera to the same settings as the one that you test the light with, you're in a good position. They are two different companies, so they are not able to coordinate with each other anyway other than having a separate trigger in order to make that strobe fire.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, so let's take a test frame here, make sure everything is on. So what I was going to say is when you're working with a subject, whether they are in the front of the camera a lot or not, always remember that as the photographer, you're really the director of the shoot. Now, sometimes I will play a little game, particularly with a lot of the celebrities that I work with, where I like to let them think they're in charge. And so I will say certain things from sort of a psychological mind game, if you want to put it that way, of putting them in a position where they feel like they're running the show. But the reality is, I've got the light, I've got the camera, I know when I'm pushing the button, I know how I'm composing the image. They are really just there to control who they are. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to get, is something that evokes who they are as a person. So quite often I will walk up, I'll introduce myself. Hey, it's nice to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this today. So listen, here's where my light is. If you play to the light, it'll make for much more, attractive image for the way that we're trying to shoot today. For the most part, I just want you to be you. I'll do my thing here. If I'm quiet, it means you're doing great. If I'm talking, it just is to let you know I want you to repeat something that I like, or something along those lines. And now I've got this person thinking about who they are as a person, and not so much about the 24 eyes behind me looking at them, or the strobe lights, or the assistants, or the makeup artist and the hairstylist, who are all focused on the subject who's now in front of the camera. And this particularly is good with, quote unquote, real people who are not accustomed to being in front of the camera. And now I've got them starting to think about something else. Now, the other trick I'll use sometimes is I'll fire the strobe a few times, even if I'm light metering or whatever. And that sort of puts people in a little bit of a dull haze, which sort of relaxes them. Because the first thing when the camera comes up typically is the shoulders go up too. So now Sheni is pretty good in front of the camera. I've seen a few things she's done. So I think she'll be okay. But I'll still give her a little bit of direction. So yeah, it's always the, oh yeah, she wanted some music, but of course we're recording, so couldn't do that. But it's always, what do I do with my hands? That's probably the biggest question I get. So what I want from this one is a little bit of a lean here, and you can sort of play with your code a little bit, anything like that. If you feel like it's natural, arms can come over like this, anything along that line. Yeah, just like that. That's perfect. Now, while I'm doing that, I think give me a variety, but I like the sort of mystery. This is going to ultimately be a black and white image, so I think it can have a little bit of a sort of a smoky sass to it. Yeah, that's a good word for it. So as you can see, it's a lot of interaction. And all of this is done with the camera down. And that's really to get people to trust me. And that's a big part of getting successful images, especially when you only have 30 seconds to 2 minutes to do a picture, which quite often happens with celebrities. So I love that lean that you did. And let's start right here. Yeah. Now, the other big thing I will tell subjects, let's go chin down just a little bit, and I'll give you a bit of direction on that. The two things that people look at most in photographs are eyes and hands. So I'll always talk about that. Hands should be as if you're holding a baby kitten and you don't want to crush it. Okay. And then everything else will be the eyes. Yeah, small touch, very soft. Exactly. All right, so let's get a test frame here. Tighten that up. Okay. Now, of course, the advantage with stands are that your light is separate from camera, but this is a setup, as I said, that I would use if I was maybe shooting on the fly and needing to have a means of moving around quickly without interrupting a lot. Okay, good. All right, that's great right there. Beautiful. I'm going to pull back just a touch.
Ian, we had somebody ask about that setup for people who don't have 18-inch biceps.
Yeah, go for it.
How heavy? No, how heavy is it? I mean, if you had to compare it to something, I know I have that same rig, which
this is very light.
That's
okay. I'm going to hand it to Shenny and
Oh,
gauge
there
it
we
that
go.
way.
There
Can you
we
just
got a little
kind of give me a
demonstration.
sense of how heavy do you feel like this
Oh my
is?
God, it's heavy.
That's heavy to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So, oh my gosh, maybe the biceps did work. To me, this is very light because I actually normally do this with my double battery. Now, she is a makeup artist, so of course she's looking at the screen to check her makeup. I don't find this particularly heavy. Magic arms come in a lot of shapes and sizes. So if you are considering this, but you are a little afraid of the weight, then for sure go and explore different weighted magic arms. There are a number of them that are super, super lightweight. I actually have one way back in storage, but when I did used to shoot a lot of stuff on the fly, I had just I can't even remember the brand, but I know I bought it at B&H years and years ago. It was just a very lightweight grip with a metal arm that you could mount a strobe to. And it was for getting your speed light off camera. And it just had a little platform for camera. And I think maybe it weighs, if maybe a quarter of a pound, half a pound, something like that. So there's options for sure. So don't feel like it has to be exactly what I did here. All right, let's get a few frames here. I think I want chin right at camera. And Derek, feel free to jump in if other questions come.
Yeah, we did have a question
We'll go
on the
back just a touch.
FJ80 II.
Good.
Peter's
Good.
asking
Little
which is
changes. Yep.
currently recommended, the M, the S, or the SE version?
So there's a few minor differences, and it really just comes down, like everything else, to preferences of things that you think will work for the way and style that you shoot. I personally, when I first tried the FJ80, I thought it was good. Then the two, they improved quite a bit, particularly with the batteries. And for somebody like me, I need to rely on my batteries. That's what's super important to me, is being able to rely on batteries when I'm on set. I haven't tested out the SE2 because I just haven't needed to be honest with you. Great. That's nice. Good. Chin towards me now. Good. Let's go ahead. Yep, right there. Chin, and bring the hands down just a little bit. A little lower on the hands. There you go. Nice. Now, those little pits of direction are just because I can anticipate what's going to be distracting. So those little changes are going to be very helpful for me.
Ian, I'm not seeing the flash firing. Is it?
It is. Ooh, maybe it's not. Glad you caught that.
Practice session.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Good. Shane, go back to what you did before, and let's stay on this side of that post. Yeah, right there. That's great because we just didn't get flash. There we go. Excellent. You see it now, Derek, yeah?
Yeah, we do now. I was like, is he
Okay,
testing?
great. Sorry about that,
Is
guys.
the meter in?
Good. Now, the other nice thing with this strobe is that there is the ability to turn a light on it. And it's very bright in here today, but in particular, when you are in a dark space, I'll utilize that quite a bit. Not only to see the shape of my light, I don't know if you can really see this, but it allows me to know exactly where that light's hitting. So if you have a question of, am I hitting my subject with the light, particularly with a rig like this is a great visual way to see that you are and make sure that light's hitting exactly where you want it to hit. It essentially is the same as having a modeling light on any other of the bigger strobes. Great. Now I do know that I put up an LED behind me just to help us with the video, and it is reflecting in the screen, in the glass in the French doors behind her, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I know I can get rid of it later. That's great. I think straight on is really good with this. Yes. Great. Excellent. All right. I think we've got some good images here. You want to, now typically if I have a makeup artist on set, hair's set because we're in rollers, but I might have Shenny come in and do little touch-ups. For sure, she's going to be the one looking at that Camerager, which normally I'm shooting to an iPad or to a big monitor, and she'll be checking that as well to make sure that the way I lit it, which she, of course, is not seeing until there actually is an image, is going to work with the makeup that she's done. So if you want to take a look, you can actually go over to that computer right there and take a quick peek. And soon as she's done with that, I'll go over and we can talk about these images a little bit. Derek, are there any other questions as we're going right here?
Yeah, we had another gear question from Renee, who currently has an FJ400, but does need a continuous background light for sports photography. Is there anything in the Westcott lineup that you recommend?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, for a continuous light in the Westcott lineup. So for
Yes.
sports photography, so I don't know how much action is going to be incorporated for the continuous, but what do they offer in that range?
Not yeah, not much. Speaking from experience, because when you're trying to freeze action, obviously an LED is not the best way to go. So Shani's going to do a little touch up just so I can get a few more frames with her. So let's talk about this for a second. So anytime you use continuous light in a setup where you're trying to freeze action, it's going to challenge you to do so. So unless you've got a ton of light, like being outside at noon where there's just an abundance of light, freezing action is not going to happen as long as there's a slower shutter speed, which typically is what you're going to sync with. Now, you can use high speed sync. However, even in high speed sync, if you were shooting at 1/8,000th of a second, if there is ambient in the room, you're not going to truly freeze your subject unless perhaps you're in a completely black room. And even then, you still might have an issue. So, any of you have tried to do this and then said, well, I don't understand, I'm shooting at 1/8,000th of a second, and my subject is still not completely frozen in the image, it's because there is still a drag with that ambient light being present. So if you really wanted to freeze somebody, you could potentially have the lights on, get a focus point, turn the lights off, have the person jump, let's say, then fire strobes in a black environment, in a black studio with black background, and then you'll get a fully frozen subject. Now, this does happen in different conditions, but it's why high-speed sync, in my opinion, has not fully landed, because you can't always do it. And that's just my experience with it. There are some people who are fantastic at it and do it probably much better than I would and do this on a regular basis. But in the times where it's been asked of me, it's not my normal thing. So we've sort of figured out ways to get around it the best way possible. A little change, okay. As far as the LEDs that are available, this is the Solix 2. Unfortunately, it's discontinued, but I do still see them around. I actually picked up a second one. I personally love this LED. It's dimmable as well as color temperature changed. The new L60 units are what Westcott just came out with. For me, they're something that's very useful, especially if you're somebody that shoots both video and still. But I don't do a ton of that kind of stuff. So my LEDs typically are as modeling lights. On occasion, I will shoot portraits with it. I just recently did a second setup during a strobe shoot on a white seamless, and I had an LED as my second setup, and I loved the results of it. But for me, it's I'm a strobe guy, usually because I'm shooting pretty quick, and I want that ability to pop, pop, pop. And it also fits my style a little bit. I hope that answered the question. All right, let's do a couple more frames here. Straight on to me, I think, was my favorite. Yeah. Okay. And Derek, feel free to jump in if you have anything else that comes up.
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple questions. I'll probably hold until you wrap this set, and then
we'll do a little review.
Chop it up.
Okay, good. Now, if I move forward or back, of course, because I did my meter reading at a certain distance, that's great, just like that. Then, of course, I need to adjust my strobe in order to accommodate that. So I know just from the amount of times I'm shooting that if I take a full step back, I need to maybe go up 3/10 on my strobe. If I take a full step forward, I might need to come down 3/10 on my strobe. These are things you might just get used to. That's great. And the reality is that, there's quite a bit of latitude with digital. Do that same thing with that little grin with the chin down just a touch right there. Nice. I like both hands up and that little look to the side. Look to the right. Yep, chin up just a bit from there. Good. Let me see your eyes. Look right at me. Nice. Good. Chin straight on to me now. Good. Now that little look to your left. Nice. That little smile. Good. And look to the right. Same thing. Look a little bit higher up. So you're looking at let's say, look at that tape on the table, but keep your chin straight at me. Good. Yep, right there. And then that little smile is great. Nice. Good. All right. That's great. Good job. All right, go ahead and get ready for set number two. I'm going to review these images. Yep. Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to review these images with Derek. Okay. All right, Derek, good there. Okay. You're better off around the corner, just to be safe. All right, I'm going to stop. Do you want to look at a couple of these images with me
Yeah,
first,
yeah,
and
go
then we
through. I
can
want to
kind
hear
of
your thoughts.
switch off that? Okay. Okay. So, typically when I'm shooting something like this, I'll wait till I see something that I like, and then once I see that, I'll know that I've got the shot I want. I might take a few more frames after that, but I think I'm pretty good at knowing when I've got the assignment done. I've told the story, I think, many times with you before, but my mentor is a guy called Harry Benson. He's the photographer who came to America with the Beatles. And, his shrill Scottish voice is always sort of playing in my head of your job is to get the job done. And at the end of the day, that's all I ever think about. So while I'm shooting, I quite often will be playing in my head this idea that, do I have the job done? And then sometimes, for whether it's appearance sake or whatever the case might be, I will shoot a little bit more just so that my client gets the volume that they might be expecting, has the ability to have more content, because of course content is everything these days. And then as well, there's the aspect of just covering my bases. But when I have the shot, I know I've got the shot, so I will move on at that point.
Awesome. And for this, in this
So
particular
something
thing,
like this actually,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead. No, keep on that train of thought.
yeah. I was going to say that, this is probably the shot that I had in my head, right? So now I saw this in black and white from the get-go. So ultimately, this will be a black and white image to me. But I look at it as, okay, this has the elements of what I was going for in terms of what I wanted from the light, which in general is just a sort of blank of light across my subject, not too bright on that post, which I can still take down a little bit more in post production. And then as well, that dead on sort of light that's above camera, but not feel like a flash on camera sort of feel. And so that's really what I was intending for. I also just happened to work a little bit with a photographer when I was in college who sort of trained me to see the world in black and white. And once I got sort of that technique down, I can look at a color image and know what parts will look like what in black and white. And so me looking at this now, I know that green to me, which doesn't work for me in color, will work fine in black and white. It'll be a nice shade of gray and that darker shade just above it. And even the chairs and the other mess that's back there doesn't bother me in black and white. It's not going to be an element that distracts me whatsoever. It's really more about the light on her face and that I captured what I wanted to in her face. And as long as those pieces are there, I know I can push the image to the final, endpoint in post.
Awesome. Now we had a couple questions regarding, gray cards and then the flash, the color temperature. So I want to start with the color temperature one because I think that one is a biggie for a lot of people. Visual modulation says the flash matches the color temperature of the sunlight more or less. What white balance should I be using where the ambient light doesn't match?
I will tell you hands down that one of the main reasons that I went with Westcott uh, and was thrilled when they started coming out with strobes was that all their strobes are daylight balance at 5,500 Kelvin. That's daylight. So for me, knowing that I have a fixed starting point for all images puts me in a great position to always nail that sort of color temperature exposure combo. And I can make adjustments from there, whether it's in camera or post. And so, depending on the shoot, depending on the assignment, I'll always make those decisions based on that starting point, knowing that at 5,500, strobe is going to be daylight balanced. My subject's going to be color temperature wise in the space that I want. And then again, digital has a lot of latitude. So, knowing that, I sort of live in this 4,700 to 5,900 sort of scale most of the time. But every so often something comes up. Maybe I have like a moody sort of blue tone, very sort of futuristic feeling assignment. I might shoot, at a color temperature that feels like that. And then I can either gel or adjust my light in order to work with that, or leave them at 5500, but shoot on camera at 3700, let's say. And then my strobe is daylight balanced, but the rest of the scene goes blue. And, those creative things are stuff that you get to play around with as we go on with different kinds of assignments and different, feels of ideas that you have and all that kind of stuff.
All right, I'm going to parlay that into a question from Michelle asking for if anyone who doesn't have a light meter, if the gray card is going to work as well, or using the histogram method. And if we can expand Michelle's question a little bit, since we were just talking about color, do you ever use a color checker? Is a color checker going to help in that, with that situation we were talking about in the last question? Is a color checker going to help kind of steer people in the post production to get their colors right?
Okay, so number one, go get a meter. I mean, it's that simple. It's at the base model Sekonic meter, I think is $209, $219, something like that. I had the original version of that. I think it's the L358 now or something. I think I had the 258 for like 20 years, and this thing was a workhorse, and it was fantastic. No bells and whistles, not complicated whatsoever. I love this thing. The only reason I moved on from it was because I needed a spot meter, and it didn't have a spot meter on it. Because at the time I was shooting a lot of 4x5 and travel stuff, and I needed to be able to spot meter, castles off in the distance and things like that sort. And then from that point on, I did move on to a couple of other versions of these meters, just only because of the extra bells and whistles that accommodated to the kind of style that I shoot. So stop with the excuse. Just get a light meter. It's that simple. That's the tough love answer for that one. Sorry. I am from New York, even though I live in LA. And then, the aspect of color checkers and gray cards, sure, they don't hurt. And if it helps with your workflow, go for it. I feel very comfortable at this point not using them. The exception would be if I was working on a project that, let's say, was a clothing catalog, and I needed to make sure that the color had to be very specific to the red, to the this, to the that. I would perhaps use a color checker at that point, and quite frankly, have a digital tech doing all that stuff so I don't have to. For the purposes of what I shoot and the purposes of the stuff that I do and the post work that I do my own retouching. I don't need it. I have used them over the years and just find that it's not something that I need to do. It's an extra step that I don't need. But by any means, I wouldn't deter somebody from utilizing those tools, because those are tools that only help you get done what you need to get done.
And I'm pretty sure Ian's done something with us talking about using a light meter. We'll have to see if we can find that link and drop it in the comment section, because like he said, I mean, you live and die by the light meter still to this day, even with all the technology and the EVFs and live view and all that stuff. You still live and die by it. So I think that's something that would be worth checking out for people. I'm going to move on to a question from Scott. Scott,
Sure.
I've had this same question, same problem. FJ400, outdoors, trying to overpower the sun. Even with the high-speed sync, I couldn't get it to do what I wanted to do. Is it powerful enough? Is it user error? And then Scott's asking if if Westcott's going to come out with something even more powerful as the FJ. So let's break it down. Is the 400 enough, or what are your thoughts?
What I think the thing that people miss all the time is that the factors will never be the same every time. Okay. So speaking from the same boat that you guys are talking about, I've had times where it worked great for me. I've had times where it completely failed and I had to move on. We're running out of time. We're running out of this, running out of that. My personal feeling on it is that even if you make it as a formulaic solution, unless you're shooting at the same time of day with the same atmospheric conditions, with the same conditions of sunlight that you're working against or working with, that you're never going to be in that exact space. So it's never going to be exactly the same. That said, yes, it is doable. And it's a very simple thought process that you have to adapt to, which is that your output of the strobe needs to be enough to overpower the sun, right? But when you start putting modifiers in front of your strobe, that limits that ability. So then you go to what's the next way to do it, putting my light closer to my subject. So maybe you're getting more power output in a shorter distance. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it helps that the light's further away so that it's a harder light source, because what's the sun? The sun is millions of miles away, right? And it's always a hard shadow when it's a full sunny day. Just like when you put a strobe further away, it's going to be a harder light source than when it's close to somebody and its surface area. It's just that simple. So the reality is, yeah, it works, but you got to get all the pieces checked and everything's got to be exactly working the way you want. Power is king. So if that's something you want to do and need to do on an assignment, let's say, maybe you're using 3 heads instead of 1. Maybe you're using 4 heads instead of 1. Maybe you're stacking 2. That's a trick that I used one time. I had to shoot a group shot of the kids from the Jersey Shore, and I needed to make sure that I overpowered natural light big time. And we were on the rooftop in Florence with a lot of wind and no ability to put up a 12 by 12 scrim and block the sun and all that. So we took a double beauty dish setup where I put 2 strobe heads next to each other inside beauty dishes. So I was modifying them, but the beauty dishes had a lot of reflected bounce. So I got more power out of there because it was spreading out the light within the strobe itself, and then kicking off a double amount of power because it just wasn't one strobe. So it's sort of creatively coming up with a way to do what you want to do so that you are putting enough power that you can output enough to get over the sun, even without high-speed sync. And I did all those without high-speed sync. I sort of abandoned high-speed sync as a tool for me because I got frustrated with the inability to do the same thing every time. So instead, I prefer to stack lights in my book. That said, I have been playing around with this little guy quite a bit at higher shutter speeds, knowing that I'm going to be closer to my subject with a small light source like this. And really, it came from the cigar stuff that we were talking about earlier. I wanted to have a solution if I was in the middle of a field at noon and wanted to do a portrait, but had crappy light, with the sun being overhead. So I was playing around quite a bit with high-speed sync, using the FJ80 inside a small umbrella, which you're going to see in a second, but just getting it very close to my subject so that the power didn't need to be so much that I couldn't overpower whatever was going on around me. The other little trick, which I utilize even without strobes, is even when it's noon, you can still shoot as the sun is just slightly behind your subject. So if your subject's back is to where the sun is and they're actually getting hair light and a shoulder light, then you actually have the advantage of overpowering the sun because it's not direct sun. So you have a choice. Maybe the background's not what you wanted or whatever, so maybe you have to find a different spot to shoot. But the reality is you don't have to have the sun blasting down Batman eyes on somebody's face in order to shoot at noon. You can turn them around or turn them at an angle and use that sun as a second light in a different way. Derek, I know we're running out of time a
Yeah.
little bit, so I'm going
Let
to
you do
head
your
over to the
thing.
next
Move on to
set
that
and get
second.
you guys skull. Yeah,
I'll step
but
back into the background.
let's keep talking as we're going. No, we can keep talking. I will talk through what I'm going to do here as Esky and Shenny are getting ready for the second shot. So one of the good fortunes I had of working with Westcott the way that I do is that I was able to develop a strobe modifier with them. And basically, that is the 24-inch deep silver umbrella. There's a deep white as well, if you prefer white. I like silver for me because I like a little pop. At the same time, I like to typically soften my light. So there's a diffusion panel that I'm going to put on as well. So it's sort of pop and soft at the same time, and it fits my style. So the white might be a better for some people. This for me was really very appealing way to sort of have a beautiful modifier for a very small strobe. And it does work on the other FJ series as well, but it's really fit perfectly to be in your backpack with a small strobe like this, or the FJ200 series as well. Some of the other features, I actually asked them to put this kind of umbrella together for the main purpose of having a one-handed ability to open the umbrella. And that's just speaking from experience, being out in the field and having limited hands. I love these spider accessories for the same reason, that I can hang things on my belt. My camera typically is here as well. So just one-handed operation, which I love. and very small package, which was super important. I do a lot of jobs on the road, and this was a way to sort of travel very light and not worry about, you know, checked items not getting to the destination that I was going to. So this was a fun little solution that we came up with. So I'm going to tilt this light just a little bit. So for setup number 2, and again, you know, the idea behind something like this is really just that I don't want to be limited to a certain type of strobe style. So, you know, when you take what is available, if you have a pop-up flash or if you have a little speed light, you're sort of limiting yourself to what's available to you to modify light and really make for beautiful light. And so once you get off camera, or even if you mount this on camera, still being able to do little modifications, whether it's through the accessory kit or an umbrella like this, or even some of the bigger umbrellas or other modifiers, you can use the S bracket, which Westcott makes, to basically put a tripod plate under a strobe like this or the FJ80 II, and it gives you a full ring that you can put any of their modifiers on. So there are options for every size strobe that you might use. Now, what I'm going to do here is sort of just a moody lit portrait style that I do quite often. So, you know, during COVID, I had to get used to working alone quite a bit. Couldn't have assistants on set sometimes. And quite often it would just be like me and a celebrity in their backyard, which was pretty crazy. And having some solutions that were very easy to set up and at the same time small in nature allowed me to have an ability to just go in with a backpack sometimes. And even if I handheld this or just had one stand in my car, that might be all I needed. So I like to put myself in the position of my subject and look at that light and where it is positioned so that I can hit my subject exactly where I want. And the nice thing with doing this handheld is you have a lot of room to play, and you can sort of move it around as you go. The other option, of course, is putting it on a stand like this and being more hands-free. Okay, so I'm going to take the magic arm off, put this accessory away, and I'm going to go back to my strobe metering here. So as I said, this is typically how I will travel on set. This is all the ability to be hands-free and have everything I need at my fingertips as needed. Okay, so let's stick with ISO 200. In this case, I want to shoot a little bit more depth of field, so I'm going to increase my power a little bit. And I'm going to go for, in my mind, I want to shoot f8. So if I'm going to shoot f8, then I want to take a meter reading at f8, but then I'm going to open my camera up a little bit and actually shoot at f7.1. And that's for that same purpose that I mentioned earlier, where I want a little bit more room to play with that histogram. All right, so that's 563. And all I'm doing here is turning up the power of the output of that strobe. Okay, so that's 801. I'm going to just take a quick peek that my battery is good, which it is. So at 801 ISO 200, 1/200th of a second, then I know that I'm going to set my camera now, 1/200th of a second, f7.1, as I mentioned, so that I get a little bit more information. Sheni is just touching up her makeup. So sometimes what I'll do in a case when my subject, I'm going to just change my camera battery, which is just time. So give me 1 second here. Sometimes what I'll do if my subject is not quite ready is I'll get a stand-in, be it my assistant or somebody else, which I'll do in 2 seconds here once it changes battery. And Derek, feel free to holler if you have questions as I'm making this little change.
Definitely.
Okay. All right, so got the battery on. We're going to make sure that we did not lose our connection, which I think we're still good. Yes, still good. Okay, good. Eski, can I grab you for a second?
Sure.
All right, so while Shenny's touching up her makeup, I'm going to bring Eski on set. He's our awesome hairstylist. If you can have a seat down at the end of the table there for me. Do you mind turning your hat around just for the light test?
For sure.
Okay, cool. Perfect. All right, can you go ahead and lean onto the table there just like that? And I want your chin up, sort of looking at that light. Yeah, maybe tilt your head just a little bit like this. Good. Yeah, right there. Perfect. Okay, great. Good, looking right there. Excellent. Nice. Oops.
And Ian, while you're testing that out, we did have a question
Yep.
come in regarding modifiers. You
Yes.
used the barn door on set number 1. When would you use the dome modifier for the FJ80 II?
So again, this is all comes down to personal preference of what you're trying to accomplish. Now, in terms of what we do, by the way, before I even answer that, the reason that exposure is dead on is because of the light meter. That is the reason you use a light meter. Now, just imagine that Derek is my client, and I'm saying to Derek, oh, I have this idea for a second setup. Let me show you what it looks like. And the very first frame is exposed dead on perfect. What do you think that client's going to say? This
First
guy knows what he's
impression.
doing, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. So if any of you out there are doubting the expenditure of $219 or whatever it's going to cost you for that base model, I can promise you I've gotten message after message from people I have, browbeaten into getting a light meter who said, I don't need one. I'm fine. The best message I got was I just was at PhotoCon out in actually with your buddy Derek out in Hawaii this past year, and one of my attendees wrote me and said, "You just saved me 10 solid minutes on my photo shoot. I nailed the first exposure all because of the light meter." Boom, done. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Awesome.
Anyway, so back to the thing. The whole purpose of modifying lights is in order to help push and drive the story that you're trying to tell. So my training on lighting really comes from the natural world. I'm not traditionally trained in the assisting world or anything along those lines. So everything I theorize about light comes from what I witnessed in the natural world and try to replicate with studio strobes or any kind of equipment, be it LEDs or even natural light and modified natural light, which you can do, by the way. So, the thought process that goes into every photo shoot I do is, what's the story I'm trying to tell? What am I trying to get across in the ultimate image that is there? Now, I'm a commercial photographer, so quite often it's product related, whether it's a magazine or an advertisement or marketing of some person or product or thing or whatever the case might be. But for any portrait, whether you shoot sports or weddings or school portraits or whatever, the whole idea is that you're telling a story. And part of telling that story is driven through light. So if the dome gives you a sense of, or a mood or a feel of light that helps drive the story of what you're trying to tell that day, then by all means, use the dome. If a grid does that, or if a softbox does that, or an umbrella does that, or a bare strobe does that, then there's no reason not to use those things as long as the story completes with the use of whatever you're putting in front of the light or not putting in front of the light. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay,
I think
great.
we might have to bring you back to do another light meter
Yeah,
workshop.
anytime. I'm always happy to do that one. Let me check on these guys. How are we doing, guys? You almost ready? Okay, great. All right. So as they're putting on the final touches here, what other questions might you have, Derek?
Looks like we just have some coming in. So Michelle says, so it looks like an ideal place to shoot indoors with a pocket flash and a modifier. How would you light a wretched barn venue with low light orange lights? You lack white walls to bounce off of. Yeah. So can we talk about bad lighting? I mean, you're the guy. You've shot everywhere, every possible scenario. How do you work with places where you can't bounce light or you have just horrible conditions to work with? What's your ideal setup?
So for me, that's where the true magic of strobes comes in, because you literally can overpower what the situation is. So if I was in a setting where the overheads were particularly ugly or color temperature was really bad, I'm going to then overpower what's going on by shooting at a low ISO in order to be able to control what everything everybody sees with what's captured in camera. So to be honest, my living room, although I have this great natural light, it's good for some things, but it is really not great for other things. So in most of the shoots that I do here, I'm typically shooting ISO 200 or lower because I'm not really looking to uh, get anything of what's in the ambient situation. I'm cutting it away, if nothing else. So, for me, if I was in that scenario, I would be bringing power. I'd be most likely going in with FJ400, something like that, so that I could overpower whatever the situation is and create light as I see fit. Now, I'm a big proponent of still staying natural to whatever that environment is. So even if I was doing that, let's say that we're using, let's say we're doing this exact portrait, but the background is the barn, I would still probably bang some bare heads into the ceiling and let light at a much different ratio, like a much lower ratio, still fall down over the background so that it still had the vibe of that location. So that one might look at it and not necessarily know that lighting is going on. They would just look at it and respond to the nice lighting. And that's typically what I would do. FJ200s have been great on this cigar project. I've traveled far and wide with them, and I'm always sort of shocked at how useful they are. Similar scenario to what you're talking about. I was inside a humidor, and inside humidors in cigar lounges, it's usually cedar wood. So you've got a very warm feeling wood. And the owner kept saying to me, we try to take pictures in here, but everything comes out orange. And sure, because you've got a lot of orange bouncing around in the room. So I lit my subject with a very white feeling light. And then I did still pop a second strobe into the ceiling and let that fall. There was a little bit of white paint on the ceiling, so I was able to hit that white with that and let it fall around the room. But again, the importance of the light meter was that I was playing with a ratio of a 3-stop difference so that the quote unquote fill light that I had around the room was something that it was subtle. And the main light was the push from my strobe that had the white feeling light, which made it feel like there was a big window in a room that literally had no windows. And very often that thought process is what drives me through. What would it be if there was a window in this room? So in that barn that we're talking about with the ugly orange lights, what if there was a window there? How would that window look? And what would the light be coming through that window look like? All right, let's jump on set. I see they're ready
Awesome.
here. All right, so Shenny, if you can have a seat there. You might want to listen to that over a couple times because I did speak very quickly there. I know that. Okay, so Shenny, if you don't mind having a seat there. Yep. Okay, she's going to get some good BTS because as we know, this is a content world that we live in. Okay. All right, so you can sit right at the end of the table there. Yeah, perfect. Now with this one, hands are going to be big, especially since you're wearing that black top, right? So yeah, anything like this, hands, yep. And let's play this like this is the portrait of the makeup artist, okay?
Right.
Let's pretend that you hired me as your photographer, you're a makeup artist, and you want to play very much so to your clients in the sense that the makeup is key, right?
And showcase them.
Yeah, exactly. So bringing the hands in will sort of help drive our view to that, okay? So that little soft touches here and there, that kind of stuff, okay? Your light's coming from above, right? So cheating that chin up just a little bit to it. And so instead of coming down, because that's not going to be good, you're going to be playing chin up just a little bit. And I like the head tilt this way. We're going to be a little specific with this one. So chin up just a little bit higher. Good, right there. And then let's look up at that light, just like that. Good. Let's try this. We'll do this one really slow. Oh, let's get a strobe. Oh. Sorry, while we were talking, power went off. So one of the other things that you'll note with these smaller strobes is they're really good at knowing that they need to save battery, especially if you have the modeling light on, which I do in this case. And the reason they sort of shut down is to conserve battery life. So it's something you need to check as you go. That's great, just like that. Perfect. Nice. Okay, so one other important aspect I'm going to bring up as we look at images like this, I'm going to check that cam ranger to see that exposure. I'm also looking at my camera. I'm also looking at the histogram to make sure that I'm in the zone. Now the Camera Ranger has a histogram as well, so there is that option. I do see there's nothing blown out in the white. That's indicated by the mountain that we talked about earlier. It's not juxtaposed all the way to the right, which means there is no pure white in this image, which is good. That means exposure is on the mark. So if my client was to ask me, oh, it looks a little hot, something like that, I can say, no, don't worry about it. That's on the screen only. Your screen's not calibrated. I see on the histogram that we're still in a good zone. That said, even with a light meter, I always like to look at it from the perspective that feel trumps math in photography. So if it doesn't feel right, and when we talked about that storytelling aspect, if it doesn't feel the way I wanted it to feel, then I'm going to modify that, and I'm going to ignore those numbers. I'm going to ignore the fact that I use a light meter in that case, and I'm going to go for it from the sake of what feels right. So in this case, I'm going to bring power down 2/10, just because I feel like I want a little less of that pop of light hitting against her skin. She's a little bit lighter in skin tone, so I'm going to make that adjustment. If she was darker, I'd be going the opposite direction. Now, the first frame we took on Esky was kind of perfect because the light was a little bit strong for her. His skin is darker, so of course it worked well with him. So, all right, let's take a few frames here. Derek, if there's questions, feel free to pop in as I'm shooting. Okay, good. Let's make sure we're still same pose. It's just slight variation in the chin. Yeah, right there. Beautiful. Great. Bring that bottom hand just onto the table flat. I like it by your elbow. No, keep everything else you had. Yep. Bring this hand over and in front of your elbow on my side. Yeah. And just pull it back just a little bit so your fingers are soft. Yeah, good. Nice. That's great. Good. Little changes from here now. Beautiful. Great. Good. Derek, I hope those images are coming through.
Yep, they are.
Excellent.
Looking good.
Great. Nice. Now, as she moves her chin, let's do a couple where you drop your chin towards me now. Good. Let's go head straight up and down. Yeah, just there. Perfect. Good. So I'm going to look at that because she made a change there, right? And now that she made that change, I know that my light might not be in the ideal position. So it's just slightly heavy, okay? So in a full shoot, I'm going to make a little adjustment here because I know it's not exactly the right spot. Okay, see how heavy it is on the eyes?
Yeah.
Yep. So knowing that, exactly, knowing that, it's just a simple adjustment on the strobe and where that light's hitting her. So come back to me, let's do the same look. Great. Good. Now we made that adjustment, and as we look at that, we do a quick check, and a lot you can tell from where that shadow drops. Now, the light moved closer to her, so power went up a little bit. Here's where we could re-meter or just know that power needs to come down just a little bit. So I came down another 3/10. Now, typically I'd have an assistant, they'd be jumping in with a light meter when we make a change with the light like this. But just for expediency purposes, I just came down 3/10. Much better. Okay, good. All right, let's try a few like this, where you can look right at camera as much as you want. Little changes each frame. Great. Now, the other thing that typically will be happening on a shoot like this is hairstylists will be sort of watching that iPad or watching a subject, and if he sees something he doesn't like, he jumps in on set, and that's part of working with a team is having other eyes going. I'm looking at light, I'm looking at what my subject's doing. I might be looking at 7 things, but I'm not looking at 4 other things, and the other people on set with you will be doing that. Great. Any questions, Derek?
Nah, everybody's probably in awe. Every frame looks good.
He said everybody's in awe, but every frame looks good. Yep. See, now you got a nice natural smile out of Shenny when you said that. That's great, Shenny. I told you makeup artists can play model sometimes.
Excellent. There you go. And I mean, I'm sure everybody's picking up on it too. It's like it's direction only when needed. You're kind of just letting her do her thing. And if you see something or notice something like, hey, pull, do this. do that, but it's not over directing.
Well, here's the thing. I typically am a bit of a quiet shooter, and
Mhm.
I tell people that quite often. If I'm quiet, it just means that you're doing great and I don't need to say anything. I say that all the time to people because it is my nature to be more on the quiet side. But you're absolutely right. There isn't a need to over direct somebody when they're doing great. They start to get in the zone. She's getting into a rhythm. She said she was a dancer. So, of course, yeah, without music, she's getting into a rhythm. But I think what happens is that, it's something beautiful about the strobe is that it sort of lulls people into some other space. And that's, again, where this sort of magic that comes through in photography, where you start getting into this rhythm, and it is like music, very much so, where people start to flow in a certain zone. And you can always see when that sort of happens. And then they sort of relax and they become themselves very quickly. And that's a great place to be. Let's try one more thing. Hands in front a bit more. Good. Yeah, it's a tight frame. Good. Right there. Great. Good. Let's go eyes to me. Great. By the way, I am using a 25-year-old, 26-year-old lens. This is one of my original Canon lenses. This is the 85 1.8
Oh wow.
with the adapter for the R5. I can't get rid of this lens. It's just too dang good. um, and I love that it has the adapter for the R5 because I've been a big fan of shooting mirrorless when I switched over. And I was actually really surprised because I hated mirrorless when it first came out.
I don't know if I missed it. Did you
Let's
go
try
over the
another.
background there? Is that a background or is that just the
Yes.
wall?
So I have, yeah, go for it. There's a small company out in Palm Springs that makes these canvas backgrounds, and I was able to get a couple of them. So this is just a piece of green painted canvas, and it's just hanging on a C-stand with a piece of PVC pipe and a clamp. So I just have it blocking the window, and the table is my dining room table, but works really well. And I use this setup quite often.
Awesome.
That's
The
great.
colors, everything's perfect.
Yeah, I intentionally went with the green. I knew Shani's complexion would look really good with it, with her color of her hair. I actually couldn't remember if she had green eyes or brown eyes, but they are a little bit hazel. And I just had a feeling that it would be like a nice little mix as opposed. I was going to go with gray, and then I switched over at the last minute to the green.
Solid
That's great.
choice.
Okay, fantastic. All right, I'm going to come over here and we can sort of just zip through a little bit. I knew we nailed it quite a long time ago, but sometimes you just find that as you're shooting, there's just so many things happening that you like that you might as well get the full scope of everything. Quite often with a dramatic light like this, I'm going to be looking at that catch light in the eye and making sure. And there's things that work better and there's things that don't, but that's why we cover the spectrum there. And you can even see that sort of drop off of light at the front of the frame when I pull back a little bit. That's the edge of the umbrella. So
Okay.
you can use that to your advantage. I could flare that umbrella up and cut that off her, uh, you know, neckline if I wanted to. And that's one of the beauties of a small light source like this. That's a modifier because you can really use different parts of it for different feels.
Mm. If I could sneak in a question, since we're on the
Yes,
topic
please.
of modifiers, Scott's asking, why did you choose an umbrella versus a softbox?
Okay, so um, part of the reason that uh, the sort of thought process behind this modifier was that I knew traveling what it's like to bring soft boxes with you, beauty dishes that have a built-in ring, which are typically what I use. I use that 24-inch rapid box beauty dish from Westcott all the time. It's one of my favorite pieces of equipment. I had gotten into the habit of using some umbrellas during COVID, as I was talking about, because I was working alone so much and I needed a lighter weight sort of means of travel, biceps aside, as you said. It's, you still want to not necessarily have to, trek a bunch of gear into a location all the time. And C stands are heavy enough, quite honestly. So um, umbrellas were sort of on my mind already. Typically, because I think I shoot so much with the rapid box beauty dish, I like the shape of light that happens out of a circle more than a square. I can't actually tell you the last time I shot with a softbox. I don't really use them that
Oh,
often. I'll use strip banks quite often, and strip banks mostly as fill lights or edge lights. More that they're very sort of focused amount of light, especially when you put a grid on it. Um, that for highlights on a fitness model, they're great because you can really edge somebody pretty specifically with a grid. And for portraits, I would say I use everything from this 24-inch up to the 7-foot umbrellas all the time, and it's just become sort of my look as of late. I change all the time though. I love lighting different ways. So options are always what I'm looking for. Options are a great thing.
awesome. Well, Ian, I want to thank you, and especially for staying a little extra to finish this out here, getting all the questions in. Man, we've come a long way from early pandemic when we were sitting on test calls for like 2 hours trying to get the setups right and everything. And
Yeah, I'm
wow.
actually shocked we got all three cameras working this time.
I know.
I learned the lesson when we did the outdoor one. I got some of those pods around my house, so the internet's a little stronger because the Cam Ranger is its own Wi-Fi network, but it's tapping in it dual bands, so it dual bands to my home network. That's how I'm still able to be on Zoom. By the way, that's a very useful tool when you're on set with in a studio with clients who are abroad and might want to watch the shoot. So I've had Zoom sessions with a client watching our shoot in real time, similar to what you guys are doing today. And it's crazy useful way to do it. But yeah, having those pods around the house has increased my Wi-Fi, so we
Definitely.
don't lose our connection because we did have that one time where every time I shot a frame, we lost the connection for a second.
The good old days. Well, Ian, I want to thank you. Obviously, a special shout out to Shenny for helping you out today and the rest of your team behind the scenes there, making everything happen. And to all of our viewers out there, thank you guys for tuning in. I say this every time we have Ian on. He is one of the best as far as it goes to really bringing you in on the process. There's no gatekeeping. Follow him on Instagram because he'll go into some of his most iconic shots and shoots and just take you behind the scenes and show what he was thinking and how he set stuff up, which is there needs to be more of that in the industry because there's a lot of people that are talking and maybe they shouldn't be talking as much, but you're out there and you're shooting just killer shots of some of the top people in some of the hardest settings and you make it look so easy, but you also break it down for us so well. So always got to give you your flowers whenever we see you on here, Ian. So huge thank you to you. We're going to drop his website and Instagram link. It's easy. Just Google Ian Spanier. You'll find all of it right there. The website's Ian Spanier. The Instagram's Ian Spanier. So, Ian, any closing words on your end?
Yeah, I definitely want to thank Shani Tabor and Eski for working with us today. I'll send you their info if you don't mind putting it in the links as well so that people can follow them on Instagram as well. Both incredible artists, and it's a pleasure to work with them. And then, yeah, exactly what you said. Please follow me on Instagram. That's where I post the most information. I love sharing my BTS and products that I use, that I actually use. I only talk about stuff that I use. So yeah, check it out and fire the questions at me anytime. I'm never afraid to answer questions.
Awesome. Good seeing you, brother, as always. Time to get back in the gym so I can get that set up on my own. And time to get schooled right here on our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. We have all the free education you could want from top professionals like Ian. That is it. That's all we got in another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space, now in the books. Catch y'all next time.